Hi everyone, my name is Jean-Luc. I'm the co-founder of Vending Machine, a token design and economic modeling firm. And we've recently started working with Bio on designing both their protocol, the Bio token, and we've recently started working on Biogenesis 2 to help parameterize this Genesis auction. So in this video today, I do want to break down Biogenesis 2. This is the second round of Bio's token generation event. I'll go through the mechanics of biogenesis, how it works behind the scenes, and how to use the new Genesis app to swap DeSci tokens or ETH for bio. So to give everyone a bit of context as to why we designed it this way, I did want to go over and state that there were a few requirements we needed to consider from the first auction moving into the second auction. Some of those requirements that we decided to target was an early bio community reward, so acknowledging and rewarding early bio supporters. The second one was pricing fairness, so we're aiming for a consistent final and starting bio valuations in subsequent auctions based on consistent pricing, and treasury sustainability. So we wanted to ensure the auction supports the bio ecosystem in two pathways, namely raising enough BioDAO tokens to maintain a healthy value for the ecosystem as it grows, and two, to raise enough ETH to ensure primarily that we have a bio ETH liquidity pool, which will act as the liquidity gateway to all the other BioDAO asset pairs. So what I'll do today is we'll run through a quick overview of the auction page, and then I'll dive in a little bit deeper into the mechanism. But to go through this auction page, first of all, once you've landed on the auction page, you can connect your wallet to view the full feature list of the page. And then moving down from the top, we can see a Biogenesis auction progress bar. So that gives the time until completion. The auction started yesterday with 45 days. So there's about 44 days left. There's also a progress bar with how much capital has been raised so far. So we can see that since yesterday, we've had 603,000 total value at current prices swapped in. And this total value of the auction limit is calculated off the maximum thresholds for each token at current prices. So if the prices of all assets increase by 30%, so will this value. Cool, moving on, we can see each individual market down here. So we can see Vita, Valley, Athena, Cryo, Hair, Cerebrum, Psi, Research Hub, and ETH, Wrapped ETH, as all individual markets in this auction round 2. You can see your balance once you've connected your wallet, the number of swaps you've done, the current effective pricing of bio based on this market, and the total amount swapped in terms of maximum thresholds so far. There's also links to both get the individual BioDAO token asset, and you can click to swap for the bio token. Cool. There is a brief explainer here of how Genesis works, and you can click on Learn More to look through the article. And then down here, we have another status bar, which shows the start date, the total swaps so far, the total amount of bio tokens available. So we can see in this auction, we'll be selling 423.3 million bio tokens. And we also have the end of the auction date. Finally, there's a status bar for the timer, which shows what percentage completion of the auction time we've currently done. The main final feature of the auction page is this activity tab, so that you can track everyone's essential deposits here. So you can see the wallet address, the time of deposit, the token they deposited through, and the amount they deposited. So we can see here there's a conversion to USD and the amount of token. So you can see this for everyone and track everyone's, and you can also look through your own swaps once you've connected your wallet. Awesome. So I'd like to go through the mechanism in a little bit more detail now to make sure there's a clear explainer for everyone. So there are 3 main milestones of each individual auction that we would like to be wary of. The first one is the minimum threshold. The second one is the maximum threshold. And finally is the exchange rate increase. So what do I mean by those? The minimum threshold essentially is the minimum amount of tokens to be swapped across before the exchange rate starts increasing for any asset. The the exchange rate increase then starts to increase linearly from the minimum amount of tokens deposited to the maximum amount, which is the cap. So that's the final exchange rate increase once the total amount of tokens allocated for Vita have been deposited. Now, to be clear, and I'll run through an example of this. Essentially, as someone is depositing Vita tokens into this auction, they will all receive the exact same exchange rate price that was parameterized at the start of this auction. Everyone will receive that until the minimum threshold is met. Once that minimum threshold is met, the exchange rate for Vita will start to increase linearly up until that maximum exchange rate. So if you want to see those minimum and maximum token thresholds, you can check out the forum post to see more detail in each of those and a breakdown as to how we arrived at those numbers. But the way that those minimum and maximum thresholds were priced and calculated in terms of exchange rate was we targeted the amended valuation of auction 1 as the minimum threshold, and we targeted $100 million threshold for the maximum, $100 million FTV for the maximum threshold. Now remember that this target, in terms of the calculation of exchange rate used to reach that minimum and maximum threshold, that was based on the VitaDAO pricing at the start of the auction. So essentially what that means is as VitaDAO, the price of Vita fluctuates, the final FDV valuations of that minimum and maximum threshold will also fluctuate based on demand. So they might end up, for example, if Vita increases by 20%, the maximum FDV threshold that will be met will be $120 million instead of $20 million. But the exchange rate, which is set in the auction, will remain consistent. So that's an important point. The note here is that auction FDVs are not something we can directly set here because of the price fluctuations of each asset. So depending on how each of these assets fluctuate in relation to each other, the final valuations and pricing will fluctuate as well. So we can see here already that there are some differences between the effective bio price using each asset. Currently, they're relatively small changes, and they might decrease or they might increase, but there will be some variability based on price changes of each of these assets. So let's explore some scenarios. Let's imagine that the minimum threshold is unmet for one of these auctions at the end of the 45-day period. So let's take ValleyDAO as an example. So if the minimum threshold is not met, that does not mean that the auction will not function. The people that deposited will still get tokens, but the pricing exchange rate will be consistent with that minimum exchange rate. So remember that the exchange rate is consistent until that minimum threshold is hit. So it means that the percentage of completion up until that minimum threshold will be distributed bio tokens accordingly to that exchange rate. Now, if the auction closes in between the minimum and the maximum threshold, so that's the scenario where the minimum threshold is met, but the maximum cap is not yet reached, that means the final exchange rate will have increased linearly from the minimum threshold up until the max, dependent on how far past the minimum threshold it reached. So if it was 50% between the minimum and maximum threshold of number of tokens deposited, the exchange rate would be 50% of the way between the minimum and the maximum exchange rate threshold. Cool. And then the maximum threshold is met. So if the maximum threshold is met for any of these assets, that means that the auction will close. That means the exchange rate is at the maximum exchange rate. So we can see this number here is the number which is the maximum threshold for each of these markets. So 2.88 million tokens is the maximum threshold for ValleyDAO. If that is hit, the maximum exchange rate will apply to all depositors and the auction will close. Cool. So we've been through a couple of scenarios now. We know that the auction can close under two scenarios, either that the timer times out or the maximum cap is hit. And we know that the fluctuations in BioDAO and ETH prices will affect the final Bio FTV, but the exchange rates will remain fixed as in terms of what was parameterized at the start. So essentially what you can do to track the progress and how this auction is going is you can come back to this page. You can see the total value swapped currently. You can see the current pricing of VITA. You can see the current amount of VITA tokens allocated to, the current amount of VITA tokens available to deposit in this specific auction. And you can see the current effective price that you can obtain bio at. So depending on these pricing valuations and depending on auction progress, so if the exchange rate starts to linearly increase, there may be scenarios where you can find cheaper prices using different assets. So that's something to be aware of. But you can use this page to track whichever pathway makes the most sense to you to obtain bio, remembering that the current valuation for bio that's targeted is around 85 million. And yeah, we can calculate the valuations as these prices increase. Great. Thanks a lot, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the bio team or ourselves as well. We'll be around in the forums and in discussions. And I'll talk to you very soon.